I am Bessie, 34 years old, and a fashion designer in our small town. When my sister Amelia asked me to design her wedding dress, I felt honored. It was my chance to prove myself to my family, especially my mother Margaret, who always dismissed my career choice. Little did I know that standing at the entrance of the venue, my own mother would deny my existence. Before I tell you what happened at the door, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you're ready to see how I stood up for myself after years of being pushed aside. Growing up as the eldest daughter in the Patterson family came with enormous expectations. My parents, Margaret and Harold, were pillars of our community in Burlington, Vermont. My mother managed the largest bank in town, while my father built a reputation as one of the most successful attorneys in the state. From my earliest memories, I understood that the Patterson name meant something in our town. People treated us differently, spoke to us with reverence, and expected nothing short of excellence from all of us. Our 4-bedroom colonial house on Maple Avenue stood as a testament to my parents' success. The manicured lawn, the pristine white columns, and the polished silver that adorned our dining table during Sunday dinners with extended family all reinforced one message: appearances matter above all else. My mother spent her weekends organizing charity galas and serving on boards, while my father networked with judges and politicians. In the Patterson household, your value was measured by your contribution to the family's standing in society. For as long as I can remember, my parents had designated career paths for their children. Medicine, law, or finance were the only acceptable options. My sister Amelia, 4 years younger than me, embraced these expectations wholeheartedly. She was the perfect daughter, bringing home straight. As from elementary school through college, joining the debate team, volunteering at the right organizations, and eventually attending Yale Law School, our father's alma mater. My mother beamed with pride at every milestone Amelia achieved. I was different. From the age of 8, fabric and design fascinated me. I would spend hours in my grandmother's attic playing with her old Singer sewing machine, creating clothes for my dolls. By 13, I was sketching designs during math class and reading fashion magazines hidden inside my textbooks. My bedroom walls were covered with cutouts from Vogue and Harper's Bazaar rather than the Ivy League pennants my mother had purchased. When I announced my intention to study fashion design instead of applying to business schools as planned, the temperature in our home dropped to freezing. My mother's disapproval manifested in silent treatments and passive-aggressive comments at family gatherings. "The Patterson women have always had real careers," she would say to relatives while I sat within earshot. "I suppose every generation has its rebel phase." Despite their objections, I applied to Parsons School of Design in New York. When my acceptance letter arrived, I expected at least begrudging support. Instead, my parents delivered an ultimatum: choose a respectable career, or fund my education entirely on my own. At 18, with nothing but determination and a portfolio of sketches, I chose my passion. The first years were brutally difficult. I took out substantial student loans, lived in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates in a questionable neighborhood, and worked 2 part-time jobs between classes. While my sister visited home to celebratory dinners during her school breaks, I stayed in New York, unable to afford the trip and unwilling to face my mother's disappointment. Graduation didn't bring immediate success. I started as an assistant at a small atelier, earning barely enough to cover my loan payments and rent. My parents never asked about my work, and at family events they introduced me with vague references to my crafting hobby in the city. Each dismissal stung, but I persisted. By 28, after years of networking and building my portfolio, I had finally saved enough to open my own small studio back in Burlington. I specialized in custom wedding and formal dresses, slowly building a reputation for unique, impeccably crafted designs. The local newspaper featured my work, and a regional fashion magazine included one of my wedding dresses in their annual bridal issue. Still, my mother referred to my studio as my little shop and suggested it was a placeholder until I found a real job. Throughout these years, Amelia remained my ally. Though she followed our parents' prescribed path, she never judged my choices. When she visited New York during law school, she would stay at my cramped apartment rather than a hotel. She proudly wore a cocktail dress I designed to her law school graduation, despite our mother's protests. We spoke weekly, sharing the unfiltered versions of our lives that we couldn't reveal to our parents. Amelia admitted the crushing pressure of living up to their expectations, while I confided my struggles to establish myself in a competitive industry. Despite our different paths, we understood each other. When Amelia called me one Sunday evening, her voice bubbling with excitement to tell me she was engaged to Thomas, a fellow attorney from a well-established New England family, I felt genuine happiness for her. She had found love with someone who appreciated her intelligence and drive. The wedding would be in 6 months, relatively quick by society standards, but Thomas had received a prestigious offer at an international firm in London, and they wanted to marry before relocating. Mother is already in full planning mode. Amelia laughed during our call. She's talking about booking the Burlington Country Club and inviting practically everyone she's ever met. I listened to her describe our mother's grand vision for the perfect society wedding, feeling the familiar pang of being an outsider to this world. Then Amelia said something that caught me completely off guard. "Bessie, there's something I want to ask you. I know Mother is expecting me to wear something from Vera Wang or Carolina Herrera, but I want you to design my wedding dress." Her words hung in the air between us. I felt a rush of emotion so intense that for a moment I couldn't speak. "Are you sure I finally managed? You know what Mother will say." "I don't care," Amelia replied with unusual defiance. "It's my wedding and my sister is an incredibly talented designer. Who better to create the perfect dress for me?" That conversation marked the beginning of what would become the most challenging and ultimately revealing chapter in my relationship with my family. Little did I know that my sister's wedding dress would become the catalyst for a long overdue reckoning. 3 weeks after Amelia's engagement announcement, she appeared at my studio door unannounced. It was a Tuesday afternoon and I was working on a cocktail dress for a regular client. When I looked up and saw her standing there in her tailored suit briefcase still in hand, I knew something was wrong. "I thought you were in depositions all day," I said, setting aside my work and brushing threads from my lap. "I finished early and told the office I had a family emergency," she replied, stepping inside and looking around at the racks of sample dresses with appreciation. "Is now a good time? I wanted to talk about the dress." My studio was modest compared to the high-end boutiques our mother frequented, but I had created a space that reflected my aesthetic. Exposed brick walls contrasted with delicate white shelving that displayed fabric swatches and embellishment samples. A large work table dominated the center of the room, and dress forms in various stages of creation stood like sentinels throughout the space. Sketches and inspiration photos covered a large pinboard above my desk. I cleared a space on the small velvet sofa I kept for client consultations, and Amelia sat down, smoothing her skirt beneath her. "I've been looking at your recent work," she said, pulling out her tablet and opening a folder of photos. "This one especially." She pointed to an image of a sleek modern gown I had created for a local doctor's daughter. "That's from last season," I explained. "I used Italian silk with French lace overlay on the bodice." I couldn't help feeling pleased that she had been following my work. "It's stunning," she said sincerely. "I love your attention to detail. The way you incorporated the lace pattern to mirror the family's heirloom jewelry was brilliant." We spent the next hour looking through my portfolio and discussing her vision. Amelia wanted something timeless but with unexpected details that reflected her personality. Unlike many brides who came with pictures from magazines, she trusted my creative instincts. As we talked, I sketched preliminary ideas, and her enthusiasm was genuine and touching. Then her expression grew serious. "I need to tell you something. Mother doesn't know I'm here. She's already made appointments with designers in New York next week." I set down my pencil, the familiar weight of disappointment settling in my chest. "So she doesn't know you want me to design your dress?" "Not yet," Amelia admitted. "I wanted to have a plan first to show her I'm serious. I'm going to tell her tonight at dinner." I appreciated her intention, but knew our mother well enough to predict her reaction. She won't be happy. "This isn't about her," Amelia said with uncharacteristic firmness. "It's my wedding, and I want a dress designed by my sister who happens to be incredibly talented. If she can't accept that, it's her problem." Her loyalty warmed my heart, but I worried about the conflict it would create. Amelia had always been the peacekeeper in our family, rarely challenging our parents' wishes directly. "Are you sure it's worth the battle?" I asked gently. "I don't want to come between you and Mother, especially now." "You wouldn't be coming between us. I'm making this choice. Besides, Thomas supports it completely. He thinks your work is exceptional." I was surprised. "You've shown him my designs." Of course, she smiled. He particularly loved that burgundy evening gown you made for the charity gala last winter. Said it showed more creativity than half the dresses he's seen at New York Fashion Week. The vote of confidence from my future brother-in-law was unexpected and touching. I felt a renewed determination to create something extraordinary for Amelia, something that would silence the doubters, including our mother. That evening, I received a text from Amelia told mother. "Call you tomorrow." The brevity spoke volumes. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:30. I was already at my studio preparing for a day of client appointments. Bessie Patterson. I answered professionally, not checking the caller ID. "How dare you?" My mother's voice was cold and controlled her anger, evident in the precise pronunciation of each word. "How dare you manipulate your sister this way?" I took a deep breath, moving away from the dress form I'd been working on. "Good morning to you too, Mother." "Don't be smart with me. What were you thinking convincing Amelia to let you make her wedding dress? You know how important this wedding is for our family's standing." "I didn't convince her of anything. She came to me with the request." "Because you put the idea in her head Amelia would never choose some homemade dress over a proper designer gown. Do you realize the Caldwells will have family coming from all over the country? Thomas's uncle is a federal judge, for heaven's sake." The familiar dismissal of my profession sent a wave of hurt through me, quickly followed by anger. "My dresses are not homemade, Mother. I'm a professional designer with a growing reputation." "In Burlington," she scoffed. "This isn't some small-town garden party. This is your sister's wedding to one of the most eligible young men in New England. All the more reason for her to have a unique custom-designed gown rather than something off the rack from a big design house," I countered, trying to keep my voice even. "You're being selfish," she accused. "Using Amelia's wedding to promote your little hobby. I won't allow it. I've already called Vera Wang's office to reschedule our consultation." "That's not your decision to make. Amelia is 29 years old and perfectly capable of choosing her own wedding dress. She's emotional right now and not thinking clearly about the implications. This wedding will be photographed for society pages. People will judge our entire family based on how she presents herself." "And you're worried my design will embarrass you," I stated flatly. "I'm worried about Amelia's future. The Caldwell family has expectations. I won't let your amateur designs jeopardize her standing with them." The conversation continued in this vein for several more minutes, with my mother throwing out words like inappropriate, unprofessional, and impractical. Each barb struck its target, but I held my ground. When she finally hung up after delivering an ultimatum that I stop this nonsense immediately, I sat at my desk, hands shaking with a mixture of hurt and determination. Amelia called an hour later, apologetic and stressed. "I'm so sorry about Mother. She's being impossible." "It's not your fault," I assured her, though my voice was tight. "How bad was it after I left last night?" She went on for hours about family reputation and proper wedding protocol. Dad just sat there saying we should all calm down and discuss it rationally, which of course only made her more furious. "And what about you? Are you having second thoughts?" I wouldn't have blamed her if she was. The path of least resistance would be so much easier. "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "In fact, her reaction only makes me more certain. I want you to design my dress, Bessie. If she can't accept that, she'll just have to be upset." Over the next few weeks, the tension escalated. Our mother employed every tactic in her arsenal, from guilt to bribery to enlisting family allies. She told our grandmother that I was taking advantage of Amelia's sentimentality and convinced our Aunt Susan to call and suggest that Amelia was putting unnecessary stress on the family during what should be a joyous time. Through it all, Amelia remained surprisingly steadfast. We arranged secret design sessions at my studio after her workday ended. I created multiple sketches based on our discussions, and we settled on a design that perfectly balanced traditional elegance with modern details that reflected Amelia's personality. She had always admired Grace Kelly's wedding dress, so I incorporated a similar high collar and long sleeves, but modernized the silhouette and added subtle architectural elements that complemented Amelia's tall, slender frame. When it came time for fabric selection, I sourced the finest materials I could find. Italian Duchess satin for the main structure, French Alençon lace for the overlay, and delicate seed pearls for embellishment. Each choice represented a significant investment on my part, as I had decided to absorb most of the cost as my gift to Amelia. The materials alone were worth thousands of dollars, not to mention the hundreds of hours of skilled labor the dress would require. For the first fitting, we arranged to meet at Amelia's friend Julia's house to avoid our mother potentially showing up at my studio. When Amelia tried on the muslin mock-up of the bodice and skirt, tears welled in her eyes. "It's already perfect," she whispered, turning to see the back in Julia's full-length mirror. "I can already tell it's exactly what I wanted." Her reaction made all the conflict worthwhile. I worked tirelessly on the dress, often staying at my studio until 2 or 3 in the morning to ensure every detail was perfect. This wasn't just a commission. It was my chance to create something extraordinary for someone I loved and perhaps finally earn my mother's respect, or at least acknowledgement of my skill. As the weeks passed and the wedding drew closer, I began to hope that our mother would eventually come around. Surely once she saw the finished dress, she would recognize the quality and craftsmanship. Perhaps this could be a turning point in our relationship, a chance for her to finally see my career as legitimate. How naive I was. The worst was yet to come. 6 weeks before the wedding, our family gathered for the traditional engagement dinner at the Burlington Country Club. The event was meticulously planned by my mother with a guest list that included both families and their closest friends. It was the formal introduction of the two families, though the Caldwells and Pattersons had moved in the same social circles for years. I arrived early wearing one of my own designs, a navy blue cocktail dress with an asymmetrical neckline that had received compliments from several fashion editors at a recent showcase. As I entered the private dining room, I noticed my place card was positioned at the far end of the table, separated from the rest of my immediate family, and seated next to distant cousins of the Caldwells I had never met. My mother greeted me with an air kiss, her eyes quickly scanning my dress. "Oh, you made that yourself, did you?" she said, just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "How resourceful." I smiled tightly. "Yes, Mother, it's from my new evening wear collection." "Well, at least it's not too experimental," she replied already, turning away to welcome more important guests. Throughout the cocktail hour, I noticed how my mother introduced Amelia to everyone with effusive praise about her legal career and her fiancé's prestigious family connections. When it was my turn to be introduced, she would say simply, "And this is our eldest Bessie. She has a little dress shop downtown." Each dismissive introduction stung, but I maintained my composure, engaging in pleasant conversation and deflecting questions about Amelia's wedding dress, with vague comments about the design being a surprise. When we were seated for dinner, Thomas's mother, Eleanor Caldwell, asked pointedly from across the table, "Margaret tells me Amelia is still considering designers for her gown. I thought most brides had that settled much earlier in the planning." Before I could respond, my mother jumped in. "We have appointments with several top designers in New York next week. Amelia deserves only the best for her special day." Amelia, seated between Thomas and his father, looked uncomfortable. Actually, she began, but my mother continued speaking over her. "We're leaning toward Vera Wang. Her classic silhouettes would be perfect for the venue." Thomas placed his hand over Amelia's and addressed the table. "Actually, we're very excited that Bessie will be designing Amelia's gown. Having seen her work, I can't imagine anyone better suited to create something unique and special for our wedding." A heavy silence fell over the table. My mother's smile froze in place while Thomas's parents exchanged glances. "How?" Unconventional Eleanor Caldwell finally set her tone, making clear this was not a compliment. My mother quickly recovered, laughing lightly. "Thomas is being kind. Bessie has been sketching some ideas, but of course we'll be working with a professional for the actual dress." "I am a professional mother," I said quietly but firmly. "You know what I mean, dear," she replied dismissively. "Someone with the resources and team to handle a dress of this importance." Thomas's father cleared his throat. "I understand your concern, Margaret, but I've heard excellent things about Bessie's work. The Harris's daughter wore one of her designs to their anniversary gala, and it was quite impressive." This unexpected support from Thomas's father momentarily silenced my mother, but the damage was done. The remainder of the dinner was excruciating, with conversation carefully steered away from wedding details. After the event, as guests were leaving, my mother cornered me by the coat check. "You've put me in an impossible position," she hissed. "How could you let Thomas announce that in front of everyone?" "I had no idea he was going to say anything," I replied honestly, "but I'm glad someone acknowledged the truth." The truth. The truth is that you're risking your sister's reputation with this stubborn insistence on making her dress. The Caldwells are being polite, but I know Eleanor is concerned. She mentioned that Thomas's sister used Carolina Herrera for her wedding last year. And I'm sure it was lovely and completely forgettable, I countered. Amelia will have a one-of-a-kind gown designed specifically for her by someone who knows and loves her. This isn't about love. It's about appearances, my mother snapped. Why can't you understand that? Your sister's wedding is not the place for your fashion experiment. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The dress will be beautiful, Mother. More beautiful than anything off the rack. If you could just trust me just this once. Trust needs to be earned, she replied coldly. And your little hobby shop hasn't earned that level of trust. Not for something this important. As she walked away, I noticed my father standing nearby, having overheard our exchange. I looked at him hopefully, but he just shook his head slightly and followed my mother out, leaving me alone by the coat check. The next blow came a week later when Amelia called me in tears. Mother has removed your name from the program, she said, her voice breaking. You were supposed to be listed as my maid of honor and the designer of my gown, but she told the printer to take it out. Can she do that? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Our mother was paying for the printing as she was paying for most of the wedding. I told her I'd reprint them myself, but she said it would be tacky to have different programs than what she ordered. She's impossible, Bessie. I don't know what to do. I swallowed my hurt and focused on comforting my sister. It's okay, Amelia. The people who matter will know I designed your dress. Don't let this create more stress for you. But the exclusions continued. I learned that my mother had removed me from the list of people giving toasts at the reception. Then I discovered I hadn't been invited to the bridal shower her friends were hosting despite being the maid of honor. Each slight was carefully calculated to minimize my visibility at the wedding events while maintaining appearances. The situation deteriorated further when our mother's sister Catherine visited my studio unexpectedly one afternoon. Aunt Catherine had always been more sympathetic than my mother, occasionally purchasing my designs and wearing them to family events. I wanted to see how the dress is coming along, she said after greeting me with a warm hug. And to check on you. I know Margaret can be difficult. I showed her the partially completed bodice of Amelia's dress, where I was hand-sewing lace appliques in a pattern that echoed our grandmother's wedding dress. It's exquisite, she said genuinely, touching the delicate fabric with appreciation. Your skill is remarkable, Bessie. Thank you, I replied, grateful for the validation. I just wish Mother could see it that way. Aunt Catherine sighed, sitting on my client's sofa. I should tell you something. Margaret has been talking to people. She's telling family members that she's concerned about the quality of the dress, suggesting it might fall apart during the ceremony or photographs. The betrayal felt like a physical pain in my chest. She's actively sabotaging me. She's afraid, Aunt Catherine said gently. She's always cared too much about what other people think, and she's genuinely worried this will reflect poorly on the family. You know how much stock she puts in the Patterson name. And I'm tarnishing it by being a designer instead of a banker or lawyer. I finished bitterly. I've tried talking to her, but she won't listen, she told me. She hesitated. What did she say? I pressed. She said she's ashamed of you, Aunt Catherine admitted reluctantly. That your career choice embarrasses her when her friends ask about you. Though I had suspected as much for years, hearing it stated so plainly was devastating. I turned away, pretending to adjust something on a dress form to hide the tears that threatened to spill over. I'm sorry, dear, my aunt said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I thought you should know what you're up against. Margaret is making sure everyone in the family has doubts about the dress before they even see it. The weeks leading up to the wedding became increasingly tense. I threw myself into completing Amelia's dress, determined to create something so undeniably beautiful that even my mother couldn't find fault. Every stitch was perfect, every detail considered. I worked until my fingers were raw and my eyes strained. Amelia came for her final fitting 3 days before the wedding. When she put on the completed dress, we both cried. The gown was magnificent, transforming my sister into a vision of classic elegance with modern sophistication. The bodice hugged her torso perfectly while the skirt floated around her in a way that seemed almost magical. The high collar framed her face beautifully, and the intricate lace details caught the light with every movement. "It's the most beautiful dress I've ever seen," she whispered, turning slowly, to watch the subtle shimmer of the pearl embellishments, better than anything I could have found in New York. I helped her carefully remove the dress and packed it in a garment bag. "I'll deliver it to Julia's house tomorrow," I said, referring to our plan to keep the dress away from our mother until the wedding day. "She'll bring it to the venue." Amelia hugged me tightly. "Thank you for standing your ground. I know it hasn't been easy with Mother." "It's been worth it," I assured her, though the constant conflict had taken its toll. The night before the wedding, I received a text message from my mother, Amelia, tells me you'll be arriving early to help her dress. Please be discreet about your involvement with the gown. Several of Thomas's family members are quite traditional about these things. I stared at the message for a long time before responding simply, "I'll be there at 10 as planned." No congratulations on completing the dress, no acknowledgement of the hundreds of hours of work, just another reminder to hide my contribution. As I packed my emergency kit with extra thread pearls and tools for any last-minute adjustments, I tried to focus on Amelia's happiness rather than our mother's disapproval. Tomorrow would be about celebrating my sister and her fiancé, not about the ongoing conflict with my mother. Little did I know that the worst humiliation was still to come. The morning of Amelia's wedding dawned clear and crisp, a perfect October day with the Vermont mountains ablaze with autumn colors. I woke early, having barely slept, and spent extra time on my appearance. My hair was smoothed into an elegant updo, my makeup flawless but subtle. I wore a sage green silk dress of my own design, chosen to complement the bridesmaids' dresses without matching them exactly. Before leaving my apartment, I checked my phone one last time for any messages about timing or logistics. There were none from my family, though several bridesmaids had texted about meeting at the venue. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 p.m. at St. James Episcopal Church, with the reception to follow at the Burlington Country Club. I had planned to arrive at the church at 10 to help Amelia dress, but when I hadn't received confirmation from anyone in my family, I sent a quick text to my sister, on my way to the church. "Everything okay?" Her reply came quickly. "Yes, getting hair done. See you at 11 instead." The change was minor, but it nagged at me as I gathered my things and drove to the church. Something felt off, as though I was being kept at a distance. I pushed the thought aside, attributing it to the stress and tension of the past few months. When I arrived at the church, the parking lot was already busy with vendors setting up. Florists carried elaborate arrangements into the sanctuary, and the wedding coordinator directed a team arranging white chairs on the lawn for the outdoor portion of the reception. I recognized several of my mother's friends from the country club who were apparently part of the decoration committee. As I approached the main entrance with my garment bag containing my maid of honor dress and the emergency kit for Amelia's gown, I noticed 2 men in suits standing by the doors. They weren't family members or friends I recognized, and their earpieces and alert posture suggested they were security. "Excuse me, ma'am," one of them said as I approached. "Are you here for the Patterson-Caldwell wedding?" "Yes, I'm Bessie Patterson, the bride's sister and maid of honor." He consulted a tablet he was holding. "I'm sorry, but I don't see your name on the approved list for early access. Only the wedding party and immediate family are allowed in at this time." I stared at him in confusion. "I am immediate family. I'm the bride's sister." He looked uncomfortable, but held his ground. "I can only go by the list I was given, ma'am. Your name isn't on it." "There must be a mistake," I insisted, feeling my heart rate accelerate. "Please check again. Bessie Patterson." He scrolled through his tablet once more and shook his head. "I'm sorry. The only Pattersons approved for early entry are Harold, Margaret, and the bride. The rest of the wedding party is scheduled to arrive at 1:30. "That's impossible. I'm supposed to help my sister get ready." I designed her wedding dress. My voice had risen slightly, and I noticed several of my mother's friends watching the exchange with interest. "Perhaps you could call someone inside to verify," the security guard suggested clearly, wanting to resolve the situation without a scene. I pulled out my phone and called Amelia, but it went straight to voicemail. Next, I tried my father with the same result. Finally, I called my mother. "Margaret Patterson," she answered crisply. "Mother, there's a problem at the church. The security won't let me in because my name isn't on some list." There was a pause before she responded. "Oh dear, what a misunderstanding. I'll be right out." Relief washed over me as I waited by the entrance. At least this would be sorted quickly. After a few minutes, I saw my mother approaching from inside, elegant in a pale blue designer suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. "There seems to be some confusion," I said as she approached. To my surprise, instead of addressing the security guards, she took my arm and led me a few steps away out of earshot of the curious onlookers. "Bessie," she said quietly, her face arranged in an expression of polite concern that didn't reach her eyes. "I think it's best if you join the other guests later for the ceremony." I stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about? I'm the maid of honor. I need to help Amelia get ready." "We've had to make some changes to the schedule," she replied smoothly. "Amelia was getting quite stressed with all the last-minute details, so we simplified things. Eleanor Caldwell's personal stylist is helping with her dress and hair." "Her dress," I repeated, my voice barely audible. "My dress. The one I spent months creating." My mother's expression hardened slightly. "Yes, well, there have been some adjustments there as well. Thomas's family was concerned about the quality, so we had a Vera Wang gown delivered as a backup. Amelia is trying both to see which photographs better." The betrayal was so complete, so calculated that for a moment I couldn't breathe. "You went behind my back and ordered another dress. After all the work I put in, after Amelia specifically chose me to design her gown." "It was a necessary precaution," she replied, unrepentant. "This wedding is too important to risk on an experiment." "An experiment," I echoed, my voice rising despite my best efforts to remain composed. "I've been designing professionally for years. That dress represents hundreds of hours of expert work and thousands of dollars in materials." "Please lower your voice," my mother hissed, glancing around at the people watching us. "You're making a scene." "I want to see Amelia," I demanded. "Right now." "She's busy with the photographer and Thomas's family. She doesn't need this additional stress." "So you're not even going to let me into my own sister's wedding preparations after everything I've done?" My mother's facade finally cracked, revealing the cold disdain beneath. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but each word was perfectly clear. "We can't let a poor designer shame the family. Not today. Not in front of the Caldwells." The words struck me like physical blows. Poor, designer, shame. All the fears and insecurities I'd battled for years, all the doubts she'd carefully nurtured, crystallized in that single statement. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity how my mother truly viewed me, not as a daughter to be proud of, but as an embarrassment to be managed. I could have crumbled. I could have created the scene she feared, shouting and demanding entrance. I could have called Amelia repeatedly until she answered, forcing a confrontation that would cast a shadow over her wedding day. Instead, I straightened my spine and looked my mother directly in the eyes. Something in my expression must have startled her because she took a small step back. "I understand perfectly now," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Thank you for making it so obvious where I stand." Then I smiled, not a warm smile, but one of recognition. I was done seeking her approval or validation. "Then pay for the wedding dress." "Excuse me," she said, clearly taken aback by my response. "If my work is too shameful to acknowledge, then it becomes a business transaction. You'll be receiving an invoice for the dress materials and labor. I expect payment in full." Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked away, my head held high despite the curious stares of the gathered guests and vendors. I heard my mother call my name once, but I didn't look back. I got into my car, placed my hands on the steering wheel, and only then allowed the tears to come. The enormity of what had just happened washed over me in waves. I had been publicly rejected by my own mother, barred from my sister's wedding preparations, and had my professional work dismissed as embarrassing. And I had no idea if Amelia was complicit in this humiliation or another victim of our mother's manipulation. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes, alternating between anger, grief, and a strange sense of liberation. When I had regained my composure, I made a decision. I wouldn't attend the ceremony or reception. Not because I was giving up, but because I was choosing to preserve my dignity. I drove home, changed out of my carefully chosen outfit, and spent the rest of the day immersed in work on another client's design, channeling all my emotion into creative energy. Later that evening, as the reception would be in full swing, I created a detailed invoice for Amelia's wedding dress, listing every yard of fabric, every pearl, every hour of labor at my professional rate. The final amount came to $15,327, a fair price for a couture wedding gown, though still less than what I would normally charge a client of my mother's financial standing. I attached a brief professional note. For services rendered in the design and creation of a custom wedding gown, payment due within 30 days. Thank you for your business. No mention of the hurt or betrayal, no emotional appeal. Just a straightforward business document that acknowledged the new terms of our relationship as defined by my mother's actions. I sealed the invoice in an envelope and set it aside, a tangible representation of my newfound resolve. Let them see exactly what my little hobby was worth in the real world. The morning after the wedding, I woke with a strange sense of calm. The initial shock and pain had settled into something harder and more determined. I went through my Sunday routine methodically: coffee, breakfast, a walk along the lake to clear my head before returning to my apartment to face the aftermath. My phone showed dozens of missed calls and messages, primarily from Amelia, but also from my father, several bridesmaids, and even Thomas. I wasn't ready to speak with any of them, so I silenced my phone and focused instead on the invoice I had prepared the night before. It was Sunday, so I couldn't mail it immediately, which gave me time to reconsider. Was I being petty? Was I burning bridges that could never be rebuilt? I spread my design portfolio across my coffee table, reviewing years of work, hundreds of hours of skill and creativity. No, I decided. This wasn't pettiness. It was a long overdue assertion of my professional worth. By Monday morning, my phone had accumulated even more messages. I listened to one voicemail from Amelia, her voice thick with tears. "Bessie, please call me back. I didn't know what Mother had done until it was too late. I wore your dress, Bessie. I refused to even try on the one she brought. Please, I need to talk to you." The message brought fresh pain, but I wasn't ready to respond. Instead, I drove to my studio where I immersed myself in work, focusing on a commission for a winter charity gala that required intricate beadwork. The repetitive, detailed task was meditative, allowing my mind to process while my hands remained busy. Around noon, Julia, Amelia's friend and one of the bridesmaids, appeared at my studio door. I had forgotten that she had a key, as she occasionally helped me with fittings. "You need to talk to Amelia," she said without preamble. "She's devastated." I continued working, not looking up. "I'm not ready." Julia sat on the stool across from my work table. "I understand why you're hurt. What your mother did was inexcusable. But Amelia fought for you, Bessie. She refused to wear the other dress. She made a scene when she realized you had been turned away." This made me pause. "Really?" "Yes. She threatened to call off the wedding when she found out what happened. Thomas had to calm her down. She wore your dress proudly, and everyone, even your mother's snobbiest friends, was stunned by how beautiful it was. The photographer said it was the most elegant gown he'd shot in 10 years. A complicated mix of emotions swept through me: vindication, lingering hurt, and concern for my sister's distress on what should have been her happiest day. "I don't know what to say to her," I admitted. "I don't want to make her feel worse, but I can't pretend everything's okay." "Just listen to her," Julia suggested. "She needs to know you don't blame her." After Julia left, I returned to the invoice sitting in my bag. Despite hearing that Amelia had worn my dress and stood up for me, I still intended to send the bill to my mother. This wasn't about the money, it was about recognition of my professional worth and the time and materials I had invested. I reviewed the invoice one more time, ensuring every detail was accurate. Invoice Bessie, Patterson Designs, Custom Bridal Couture. Client Margaret Patterson, date October 2025. Description: custom wedding gown design and creation for Amelia Patterson. Includes Italian Duchess satin 12 yards, $2,400. French Alençon lace 8 yards, $3,600. Hand-sewn seed pearls and crystal embellishments, $1,850. Custom embroidery, $975. Design fee, $2,500. Labor, $100. 25 hours at $32. $4,000. Fittings and adjustments, $750. Total $15,327, due within 30 days. I placed it in an envelope addressed to my mother and dropped it in the mail that afternoon, feeling a strange mixture of anxiety and empowerment as it left my hands. The rest of the day passed in a blur of productivity. I answered emails from clients, scheduled fittings for the coming week, and worked on sketches for my spring collection. Focusing on the future of my business felt like an act of defiance against my mother's dismissal. That evening, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I checked the peephole, I was surprised to see my father standing there looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Harold Patterson was usually impeccably groomed, his appearance as carefully maintained as his professional reputation. I hesitated before opening the door. My father had never been cruel like my mother, but his silence and passivity had enabled her behavior for years. Still, curiosity won out, and I let him in. "Bessie," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I owe you an apology." This was so unexpected that I simply stared at him. In 34 years, I could count on one hand the times I had heard my father apologize for anything. "May I sit?" he asked, gesturing to my small living room. I nodded, and he lowered himself onto my sofa, looking suddenly older than his 62 years. "I should have stopped her," he said simply. "I knew what your mother was planning, and I did nothing." "Why are you here now?" I asked, remaining standing. "Amelia showed us the pictures from the wedding. Your dress." He paused, seeming to search for words. "It was extraordinary. More beautiful than anything I've seen in those magazines your mother reads. Everyone was asking who the designer was. And what did Mother tell them?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "She told them it was a private commission," he admitted. "But Amelia corrected her every time. She made sure everyone knew you had designed it." I felt a rush of gratitude toward my sister. That must have made Mother furious. "She was conflicted," he said carefully. "The dress was receiving so many compliments that she couldn't entirely dismiss it. But acknowledging you as the designer meant admitting she had been wrong. And we both know that's not something Margaret Patterson ever does," I replied. My father sighed heavily. "I've enabled her for too long, Bessie. I convinced myself it was easier to keep the peace, to let her have her way in family matters while I focused on my career. But seeing what happened at the wedding, how she treated you, I'm ashamed of my part in it." His candor was disarming. "I appreciate you saying that, Dad. But it doesn't change what happened." "No, it doesn't," he agreed. "But I want you to know that I'm proud of your success. I've followed your career more closely than you might think. That piece in New England Fashion Monthly last spring about emerging designers, I have a copy in my desk drawer at work." This revelation stunned me. "You never said anything." "I should have," he acknowledged. "I was a coward, worried about creating conflict with your mother. It was easier to stay silent, and that silence hurt you. I'm sorry, Bessie." As we continued talking, my father revealed that several of his colleagues' wives had commissioned pieces from me without my realizing their connection to him. He had quietly recommended my studio to people in his circle, a small gesture of support that he had never mentioned. When he finally left 2 hours later, our relationship had shifted. It wasn't healed. Too many years of distance and unspoken hurt remained for that, but a door had opened, creating the possibility of something new. The next day, I received a call from Aunt Catherine, who had apparently spoken with my father after his visit. "Your invoice arrived," she said without preamble. "Margaret is beside herself." "Good," I replied, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "She's calling it extortion," Aunt Catherine continued. "She's convinced you're punishing her." "It's a standard invoice for services rendered," I explained. "If she didn't want to pay for a custom wedding gown, she shouldn't have ordered one." "She's arguing that she didn't order it. Amelia did." "Amelia wasn't the one who made it a business transaction," I countered. "Mother explicitly stated that my work wasn't good enough to be associated with the family." "Fine. Then she can pay for it, like any other client." Aunt Catherine was silent for a moment. "You know, I've waited 30 years to see someone stand up to my sister this way. It's about time." Her support meant more than I expected. "Thank you." "The dress was magnificent, by the way," she added. "Absolutely stunning. Even Eleanor Caldwell was asking about the designer." Over the next few days, more family members and friends reached out, many expressing admiration for both the dress and my stance with my mother. I learned that the wedding photos were circulating widely, with many comments about the unique and elegant gown. While the validation was gratifying, I remained focused on my work, using the renewed energy and clarity to advance my designs and business plans. By the third day after mailing the invoice, I had still not spoken directly with Amelia or my mother. I knew I would need to talk to my sister soon. Our relationship was too important to sacrifice, but I wanted to do so from a position of emotional strength, not lingering hurt. That afternoon, as I was reviewing fabric samples with a client, I received a text message from an unknown number. "Is this Bessie Patterson? The designer. I was at the Patterson Caldwell wedding and am interested in commissioning a gown for my daughter's wedding next spring." It was the first of several such messages I would receive in the coming days as word of mouth about the dress spread through New England's social circles. Ironically, my mother's attempt to hide my work had created precisely the kind of exposure she had feared, but with an overwhelmingly positive response that contradicted her narrative about my hobby shop. As I prepared to close my studio that evening, I felt a sense of quiet confidence that had been missing before. Whatever happened next with my family, I knew my worth both personally and professionally. The invoice sitting on my mother's desk was more than a bill. It was a declaration of independence. 3 days after the wedding, I arrived at my studio earlier than usual, energized by a new commission that had come through based on a referral from one of the wedding guests. The morning light streamed through the large windows, illuminating the space where I had created countless designs, including Amelia's wedding dress. There was something poetic about the fact that the dress my mother had tried to hide was now bringing new clients to my door. I had just settled at my desk with a cup of coffee when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up, expecting the fabric delivery I had scheduled, and instead found myself staring at my mother. Margaret Patterson stood in the doorway of my studio, looking distinctly out of place among the dress forms and fabric swatches. She was impeccably dressed as always, in a tailored wool coat and designer pumps. But something was different. The usual confidence that bordered on arrogance had diminished, replaced by an uncertainty I had rarely seen in her. "May I come in?" she asked formally, as though entering a stranger's office. I nodded, setting down my coffee. "I'm surprised to see you here." She stepped inside, glancing around at the work in progress. Her gaze lingered on a half-completed evening gown mounted on a dress form near my workstation. "Your invoice arrived," she said finally, opening her handbag and removing the envelope I had sent. "I assumed it would by now," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. $15,327, she read from the paper, for a wedding dress that wasn't even used as planned. I felt a flash of anger at the implication. The dress was used exactly as planned. Amelia wore it. Unless you're suggesting she changed into that Vera Wang backup you arranged. My mother had the grace to look uncomfortable. No. She refused to even try the other one. This confirmation of Julia's account brought a small measure of satisfaction. Then the invoice stands. "It's an outrageous amount," she countered, though, with less conviction than I had expected. "Actually, it's below market rate for a custom couture gown," I explained calmly. "Vera Wang's custom pieces start at $20,000. Carolina Herrera's run even higher." She paced a small circuit in front of my desk, clearly struggling with something beyond the monetary value. "This isn't just about the dress." "No," I agreed. "It's not." My mother stopped pacing and looked at me directly. "I've been researching your business since the wedding, reading reviews online, looking at photos of your work." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "You've built something impressive here, Bessie." The admission was so unexpected that for a moment I thought I had misheard her. "What?" "Your clients speak very highly of you. Multiple 5-star reviews mentioning your attention to detail and creative vision. Several bridal magazines have featured your designs." I remained silent, unsure where this was leading. "I didn't know," she continued, her voice quieter. "I never bothered to look because I was so fixated on the fact that you had chosen a different path than the one I wanted for you." "The Patterson family path," I said, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my tone. "Yes," she sighed, appearing genuinely tired. "I was wrong, Bessie. The dress you created for Amelia was—" She hesitated, extraordinary. Everyone at the wedding was asking about it. Eleanor Caldwell's sister-in-law wants to commission you for her daughter's gown. I had already received the inquiry but was surprised my mother knew about it. That doesn't change what happened at the church. No, it doesn't, she acknowledged, her usual defensive posture notably absent. What I did was unforgivable. I let my obsession with appearances and my own prejudices blind me to your talent and your dedication to your sister. She reached into her handbag again and withdrew a checkbook and pen. I'm prepared to pay the invoice in full. It's the least I can do. I watched as she wrote the check, still processing this unexpected turn of events. When she handed it to me, I noticed her hand trembled slightly. Thank you, I said, accepting the check and placing it on my desk without looking at it. The truth is, my mother continued, seeming determined to say everything she had come to say. I've been jealous. Jealous? I repeated, genuinely confused. Of what? Of your independence, your courage. She gestured around the studio. You built this on your own terms without compromising or relying on the Patterson name. I've spent my entire life conforming to expectations, worrying about what people think. You've been free in a way I never allowed myself to be. The vulnerability in her admission was startling. This was a side of Margaret Patterson I had never seen, reflective, almost humble. I saw the photos of Amelia in your dress, she continued. She looked radiant, happier than I've ever seen her. And I realized that in trying to control every aspect of the wedding, I nearly ruined her day and destroyed my relationship with both my daughters. She still wore the dress, I said, allowing myself a small smile. Despite everything. She did more than wear it, my mother replied. She made sure everyone knew who designed it. She told the photographer to get detailed shots specifically to showcase your work. Even during the father-daughter dance, she was telling Harold's colleagues about your studio. This image of my sister advocating for me throughout her wedding day brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I need to call her. She's devastated that she hasn't heard from you, my mother confirmed. She thinks you blame her for what happened. I don't, I said firmly. This was never about Amelia. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. Decades of misunderstanding and hurt couldn't be erased with one conversation, no matter how candid. But something had shifted, creating space for a different kind of relationship, if we both chose to pursue it. Would you? My mother began hesitantly. Would you be willing to show me your current collection? I'd like to understand your work better. It was a small request, but a significant one, an acknowledgement of my professional identity and an expression of interest that had been withheld for so long. I stood and gestured toward the racks of completed designs at the back of the studio. I'd be happy to, I replied, leading her through my workspace. For the next hour, I showed her my latest creations, explaining the inspiration behind different pieces, the techniques I had developed, and the business I had built. She asked thoughtful questions and listened attentively to my answers. When we reached a wedding gown I had recently completed for another client, she touched the fabric with appreciation. I see it now, she said quietly. This isn't a hobby or a phase. This is who you are. Yes, I confirmed. It always has been. Before she left, we reached a tentative understanding. Our relationship would need time and effort to repair, but we both expressed willingness to try. She would respect my career and acknowledge my achievements, and I would attempt to move forward without holding on to past resentments. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Bessie, would you consider designing a mother of the bride dress for me? For Thomas's sister's wedding next spring, I'd like to wear something created by my daughter. The request was both an olive branch and a public endorsement. I'd be honored, I replied, meaning it despite our complicated history. After she left, I sat at my desk, looking at the check she had written. The amount matched my invoice exactly, but the significance went far beyond the monetary value. It represented acknowledgement, respect, and the beginning of a new chapter in our family story. I picked up my phone and called Amelia. It was time to rebuild that relationship too, starting with thanking her for standing up for me and wearing my design with pride. When she answered, the relief in her voice was palpable. Bessie, thank God. I've been so worried. I'm sorry I didn't call sooner, I said. I needed some time to process everything. I understand. Are you okay? I'm getting there, I answered honestly. Mother came to see me today. She did, Amelia sounded surprised. She didn't tell me she was planning to. I think it was a spontaneous decision. She paid the invoice and I hesitated, still processing the interaction myself. We talked. Really talked, maybe for the first time. Wow. I never thought she'd admit she was wrong. It's a start, I said cautiously. How was the honeymoon? We postponed it, Amelia admitted. After everything that happened, neither of us felt right about leaving immediately. We're heading to Italy next week instead. You didn't have to do that, I said, touched by their consideration. We wanted to make sure you were okay first, she explained. And Bessie. Everyone loved the dress. I've never received so many compliments. Even Thomas's grandmother, who never approves of anything modern, said it was the most elegant gown she'd seen in years. As we continued talking, the weight I had been carrying began to lift. The professional validation was gratifying, but the personal reconciliation meant even more. By standing my ground and demanding respect for my work, I had catalyzed a transformation in my family dynamics that might never have happened otherwise. Later that day, I deposited my mother's check, and then did something I had been considering for months. I put down a deposit on a larger studio space in downtown Burlington. It was time to expand Bessie Patterson Designs not just as a business venture, but as a statement of who I was and what I had accomplished through perseverance and talent. The invoice had been paid in full, not just financially, but in the currency of respect and recognition I had sought for so long. 6 months after Amelia's wedding, my new studio space was thriving. The exposed brick walls and tall windows created the perfect backdrop for my expanding collection, and the additional square footage allowed me to hire 2 assistants to help with the increased workload. The incident at the wedding had unexpectedly become a turning point for my business as word of mouth spread through the New England social circles my mother had once feared would judge her. On a bright spring morning, I stood in the center of my studio surveying the transformation that had occurred both in my professional space and in my personal life. The healing process had not been immediate or simple. There had been difficult conversations, uncomfortable moments, and occasional setbacks as old patterns threatened to resurface. But with consistent effort from all sides, my family relationships had begun to evolve into something healthier and more authentic. Amelia and Thomas had returned from their honeymoon in Italy with fabric samples from Milan for my collection and a newfound confidence in their relationship. Having witnessed her stand up to our mother had strengthened Thomas's respect for her, and they were building a marriage based on mutual support rather than societal expectations. My father had become more present in my life, occasionally stopping by the studio to bring lunch and hear about my latest projects. His quiet pride in my accomplishments was evident in the way he now mentioned my career to his colleagues and friends without hesitation. But the most profound change had been in my relationship with my mother. The transformation wasn't dramatic or complete. Margaret Patterson would always care about social standing and appearances, but she had begun to redefine success in more inclusive terms that had room for my chosen path. 2 months after our confrontation, she had invited me to lunch at her country club, where she introduced me to her friends, not as her daughter who has a little shop downtown, but as Bessie Patterson, whose designs have been featured in Nouvelle Bézi, England Fashion Monthly. It was a small gesture, but one that acknowledged my professional identity in a space that had previously only recognized traditional markers of success. The mother of the bride dress I designed for her to wear to Thomas's sister's wedding became another bridge between us. During the fittings, we had conversations that went beyond superficial pleasantries, touching on her fears about aging, her regrets, about prioritizing social status over family happiness, and her grudging admiration for the courage it had taken me to forge my own path. I always thought success looked a certain way, she admitted, during one fitting as I adjusted the sleeves of the midnight blue silk gown that complemented her silver hair. Good schools, prestigious careers, the right social connections. I never considered that success could be measured by passion and personal fulfillment. It took me a long time to believe that myself, I confessed. Every time I was dismissed as having a hobby instead of a career, I questioned my choices. I'm sorry I contributed to that doubt, she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. Your talent deserves recognition. These moments of connection didn't erase the past, but they created possibility for the future. I learned to set boundaries while remaining open to genuine change, and my mother learned, however imperfectly, to see me as I was, rather than as she had wished me to be. The invoice that had caused such turmoil was now framed on the wall of my private office, not as a reminder of conflict, but as a symbol of the day I had finally claimed my worth both professionally and personally. Beside it hung a photograph of Amelia in her wedding gown, radiant and confident, a visible testament to what I could create when I trusted my vision. The healing journey was neither linear nor complete. There were still family gatherings where tension would briefly resurface, moments when old habits threatened to override new understanding. But with each interaction, we were writing a new story, one in which differences could coexist with respect and success could be defined in multiple ways. Perhaps the most valuable lesson I learned through this experience was that true worth isn't determined by others' validation. For years, I had sought my mother's approval as confirmation of my value both personally and professionally. The wedding incident painful, as it was forced me to recognize that my worth had never been dependent on her recognition of it. By sending that invoice, I wasn't just demanding payment for a dress, I was declaring that my time, skill, and creative vision had value regardless of whether anyone else acknowledged it. And paradoxically, it was only when I fully embraced this truth that others began to see it too. My studio had become a sanctuary of self-determination, a place where I created not to prove my worth to others, but because creation itself was valuable. Each client who trusted me with their vision, each design that transformed from sketch to reality, reinforced what I now knew with certainty. I was exactly where I was meant to be doing, exactly what I was meant to do. As I helped a bride to be into a gown I had designed for her beach wedding, watching her face light up at her reflection, I thought about how far I had come. Not just in terms of business success, but in the journey towards self-acceptance and family healing. "It's perfect," the bride whispered, twirling to watch the lightweight silk chiffon float around her. "Exactly how I imagined, but somehow even better." "That's the magic of custom design," I replied, adjusting the delicate beading at the waist. "It becomes a collaboration between your vision and my craft." Later that evening, as I locked up the studio, I reflected on the truth that had emerged from the conflict at Amelia's wedding. Sometimes it takes a painful invoice to show your worth. But the real value was never in that. Check, it was in finally being seen for who you truly am. Have you ever had to stand up for your worth, whether in your career or personal relationships? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through life's challenges. And if you know someone who needs a reminder of their own value, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your worth isn't determined by others' recognition of it.